TIFU by accidentally sending my ex a message meant for my best friend, and now my life is in chaos. Let me set the stage. I, 28M, was in a serious relationship with my ex, Emma, 27F, for almost 4 years. We had the kind of relationship that everyone envied, the picture-perfect couple, you know? We traveled together, made plans for the future, and honestly, we were pretty inseparable. That was until things started to fall apart about 6 months ago. We broke up after a series of huge arguments and unresolved issues. It was painful, but we eventually decided that it was best for both of us. After the breakup, we agreed to remain friends, or at least, that was the plan. We had a few awkward conversations, exchanged some texts here and there, and kept it cordial. I genuinely thought we could be civil, but in the back of my mind, I knew it was never going to be the same. I still had feelings for her, and I'm sure she felt similarly, even though we both tried to act like everything was fine. A few weeks ago, I had a conversation with my best friend, Jordan, 28M, about how I was struggling with the breakup. I was still haunted by memories of Emma, and every time I saw her on social media or bumped into her in our small town, it just felt like a gut punch. Jordan, being the supportive friend that he is, was there for me, listening to me vent about how I felt. I made a comment about how it seemed like Emma had moved on, and it was really messing with my head. That's when Jordan gave me the worst advice, in hindsight, that I could have taken. He told me I should text Emma. Not to beg her to come back or anything crazy, but just to show her that I was okay and that I had moved on. He said it would help me find closure and that I might even be able to salvage a friendship with her. At the time, it seemed like a decent idea. I was still in a place where I wanted things to work out, even if just as friends. So, after that conversation, I decided to send her a message. I wasn't sure what to say, but I figured it would be casual, something to show that I had my life together. I spent about 30 minutes crafting the perfect message, making sure it didn't sound desperate but still sincere. I wrote, "Hey, Emma. I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm doing okay. I've been focusing on myself lately, and things are looking up. I hope you're doing great too, and I'm really hoping we can just be friends eventually. Take care." It seemed harmless enough, right? I wasn't professing my undying love or anything like that. I just wanted to reach out, show I was fine, and move on. So, I sent it. But here's where things went horribly wrong. As soon as I hit send, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I had accidentally sent the message to Jordan instead of Emma. Now, I know what you're thinking, it's just a small mistake, but let me explain why it was catastrophic. First off, I had mentioned in the message that I was focusing on myself and things are looking up. That was a blatant lie. I wasn't doing great at all. I was a mess, and the only reason I even said that was because I was trying to convince myself that I was okay. Jordan knew this. He knew how bad I had been feeling, and he knew I wasn't looking up at all. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that I had specifically mentioned in the message that I wanted to be friends with Emma. Now, Jordan, being the guy he is, took this as some sort of green light to completely roast me. He immediately responded with a message, "Bro, are you kidding me? This is the same girl who dumped you after you did all that stuff for her? And now you're begging for friendship? Dude, you need to stop being a doormat and move on for real." At this point, my heart was in my throat. I frantically typed back, "No, no, no. That was meant for Emma. Not you. Please don't tell her about this. This was a mistake." But of course, Jordan being Jordan, he thought this was absolutely hilarious. He didn't stop there, he actually screenshot the message and sent it to all of our mutual friends in a group chat. The floodgates opened. My phone exploded with notifications. I had messages from every single one of our friends, all of them laughing at my expense. The worst part was that Emma was in that group chat too. So not only had I accidentally sent her a message meant to show I was moving on, but now she knew I was lying about it and that I had sent it to Jordan by mistake. In that moment, I wanted to crawl under a rock and die. I felt humiliated. I had just exposed myself as an emotional wreck in front of everyone, including the one person I was trying to act strong in front of. To make matters worse, Emma started texting me directly. "Hey, just saw your message in the group chat. I don't know whether to laugh or feel bad for you. But honestly, I don't think we should be friends. I still care about you, but this isn't healthy for either of us. Please just move on." I tried to explain myself, but she wasn't having it. She told me she needed space and that she was glad I was focusing on myself, but the whole situation just felt like an uncomfortable reminder that I had made a fool of myself. The next few days were pure hell. Our mutual friends kept joking about it, and every time I saw Jordan, he would throw in some sarcastic comment about how I was doing great and so over Emma. It was like everyone was in on this cruel joke, and I was the punchline. I should have known better than to text Emma in the first place, but I really thought I was doing the right thing. Instead, I've ended up more emotionally shattered than I was before, and now, it feels like the whole world knows just how much I'm struggling. In the end, I'm still trying to pick up the pieces. Emma and I haven't spoken since that day, and our friend group has definitely changed. I'm not exactly sure where I go from here, but I've learned a valuable lesson about how not to handle a breakup. Sometimes, no matter how much you think you're over it, sending that one last message can just make everything worse. So, if you're ever in a similar situation, don't do what I did. Trust me. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by inviting my ex to a friendly dinner and accidentally rekindling a disaster. So, I recently made the stupid decision to invite my ex to dinner. Let me explain how this unfolded, because looking back, I can't believe how much of an idiot I was. A bit of background: my ex, let's call her Sarah, and I dated for about 3 years. Things ended pretty poorly, mainly because I found out she had been cheating on me for a while. We broke up. I was heartbroken for a long time, but I eventually healed and moved on. I even started dating someone new, Sophia, who's awesome, and honestly, I don't deserve her, but I digress. For some reason, Sarah and I ended up staying somewhat amicable after the breakup. It wasn't like we were friends, but we occasionally bumped into each other at mutual events, and we didn't completely hate each other. So when I ran into her at a coffee shop about a month ago, I figured it would be fine to grab dinner as old pals, just to catch up and put any bad blood behind us. I knew it was probably a bad idea, but hey, maybe I was just curious to see how she was doing. Maybe I thought I was over it and could handle it. I texted her and suggested we meet at this cozy little restaurant I've been going to recently. Nothing fancy, just a nice low-key place. She agreed almost immediately, and we set the date. The night of the dinner, I was nervous but also somewhat excited. I hadn't seen her in a while, and I thought it would be nice to have an adult conversation, maybe even laugh about how awkward our relationship had been towards the end. I thought, hey, I'm in a better place now. I'm over her, right? So, I put on my best casual but put together look, and off I went. When Sarah showed up, I realized I might have underestimated just how awkward this could be. She looked different. She had dyed her hair a bright red, and she was dressed in this sleek black dress that screamed, "I'm doing fine, look at me now," in a way that made me feel suddenly very conscious of my own outfit. She gave me a tight smile and hugged me. It was one of those hugs where you both don't know if it's supposed to be awkward or not. I should have taken that as my first sign to turn around and bolt, but of course, I didn't. We sat down and the conversation started off weird. There was a lot of small talk at first. How have you been? How's work? how's your family? The usual stuff. But there was this underlying tension. I kept glancing at the menu and avoiding eye contact, because I could feel myself getting sucked into a vortex of bad memories. Then, she asked about Sophia. Now, I should have seen this coming. It's normal, right? She's curious. We dated for 3 years, after all. But instead of casually asking, she leaned in and asked, so, how's the new girlfriend? What's her name again? Sophia? She said Sophia's name like she was testing it out, like she had to make sure it still stung me. I felt this weird mix of anger and guilt. I didn't know how to answer without sounding defensive, so I said, yeah, she's great. She's everything I wanted in a person. Sarah just smiled, but I could tell it was more of a sarcastic smile. I'm sure. I'm glad you moved on, she said, and there was this strange edge to her voice. We both fell silent for a moment, which, of course, made the already uncomfortable atmosphere even worse. I should have asked for the check right there, but for some reason, I didn't. Instead, I smiled and said, how about you? Been seeing anyone? She hesitated for just a second, and then casually said, yeah, I'm seeing someone now. He's really into music, like you were. He's a guitarist, actually. I didn't know what to say to that. Was she trying to make me jealous? I didn't know. I tried to laugh it off, even though it didn't feel funny at all. As the night went on, the conversation slowly shifted into more personal territory. She started talking about our past relationship like it was some kind of nostalgic memory, like we were just two old friends reminiscing about the good times. But as she spoke, I could feel this slow burn of frustration creeping up. She was talking about the relationship as if she had no part in its demise, as if she had been the perfect girlfriend and I had just messed things up. The more she spoke, the more irritated I became. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in anymore. It wasn't all on me, you know, I said, a little too sharply. She raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond right away. I continued, you know, you weren't exactly the best partner either. I don't know if you've forgotten, but you kind of cheated on me. A lot. The look on her face immediately shifted. She became defensive, crossing her arms over her chest. I already apologized for that, okay? I'm sorry for what happened. But I've moved on, and I don't want to keep rehashing it. Her response was like a slap in the face. It made me realize just how badly I misjudged the situation. This wasn't a friendly dinner. This was an opportunity for her to pretend like everything was fine and that I was the one still holding on to the past. I felt stupid for even agreeing to meet her. At that moment, the waiter brought out our food. I couldn't even taste mine. My stomach had turned into a ball of anxiety. I could feel this familiar knot forming in my chest, like the old wounds hadn't really healed. I had let her back into my life, even for one night, and it was already unraveling. I made the decision right then and there that I was done with this dinner. You know what, I think I need to go, I said. I don't think this is working. Sarah looked stunned. She tried to protest, but I didn't want to hear it. I paid the bill, way more than I should have, considering the awkwardness, and walked out, leaving her sitting there alone. The next few days were a blur. I felt embarrassed, humiliated, and confused. I was angry at her for playing with my emotions again, and even angrier at myself for falling into this trap. Sophia, bless her heart, noticed I wasn't myself and asked what happened. I had to tell her the whole embarrassing story, and she was kind enough to not say, I told you so. Instead, she just held me and let me vent about how stupid I was. I learned a valuable lesson that night: never invite your ex to dinner for closure or to be friends. It only opens old wounds that never really healed in the first place. And while I'm not saying I didn't learn from it, I just hope I never make that mistake again. I love Sophia, and I'm not going to risk that for anything, especially not for someone who can barely take responsibility for their actions. Moral of the story: if you want to close a chapter, Don't invite the person who ripped the pages out to dinner. TIFU by accidentally ghosting my best friend for 6 months, and not realizing it until it was too late. It all started one normal Monday morning. I woke up, checked my phone, had my coffee, and started going through the usual morning routine. Checking texts, emails, and, of course, social media. I had a ton of messages on my phone, as per usual, but I didn't think much of it. Most of them were from my family, work, and group chats, which I casually skimmed through. I did a quick scroll through my best friend's recent posts on Instagram and saw nothing out of the ordinary. She was doing her thing, posting memes, stories, and having fun. I didn't think about it at all. What I didn't realize at that moment was that the last message I had received from her was 6 months ago. Let me rewind a bit. My best friend, Jess, and I had known each other for over a decade. We met in high school, and from there, our friendship just grew stronger and stronger. We were attached at the hip during college, and while life threw a few curveballs, we always managed to find our way back to each other. Even though we both had busy schedules post-college, we made it a point to catch up once or twice a week through texts, calls, or hanging out. I had been to her birthday parties, and she'd been to mine. We celebrated holidays together. We shared a lot. In fact, I would have said we were pretty much sisters at this point. But then something changed. 6 months ago, I had started a new job. It was a huge step forward in my career, and I was eager to prove myself. With this new job came a lot of extra responsibilities, which I hadn't expected. I was waking up earlier, staying late, and feeling like I was constantly running on fumes. At the same time, I had been dealing with some personal issues, family drama, a rocky relationship, and, to top it off, some mental health struggles. I wasn't necessarily in a bad place, but I wasn't in a good place either. I didn't want to burden Jess with my problems, so I started to withdraw a little. At first, it was subtle. I'd be a little slow to respond to her texts. Then I'd forget to reply altogether. Sometimes I'd see her messages, get distracted with work or something else, and completely forget to reply. One day, she called me. I let it ring and went to voicemail. I was busy. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. I'd call her back later, right? But the calls and texts didn't stop. She kept reaching out. The longer I ignored her, the more uncomfortable it became. Eventually, I convinced myself that it wasn't a big deal. Jess had her life too, she didn't need me constantly checking in, right? After all, I was just a little too swamped to really engage. It was a busy time. She'd understand. Little did I know, Jess was taking all of this differently. She didn't confront me right away. She didn't go off on me or start making a big deal out of it. In fact, I think she believed it was something she had done wrong. A couple of weeks passed, and I noticed a shift in our group chats. She started being less and less active in our conversations. At first, I thought it was just because we were all busy, but the silence from her side was becoming deafening. The other friends noticed too, and they started sending me messages, checking in on me. Have you talked to Jess lately? She's been a bit distant. Now, I knew something was up, but I didn't think it was as serious as it was. I thought Jess was just going through her own stuff, and maybe she just didn't feel like chatting. I'd shoot her a quick text, saying something like, "Hey, everything okay?" but I didn't get much in return. Over the course of the next few months, our communication dwindled down to nearly nothing. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. She was busy. I was busy. It happens. It's fine. Maybe we were growing apart a little, but I figured that was natural as people get older, right? Then, about 6 months after the last time I'd actually spoken to her, I randomly got a text from her. It was a simple message, "Hey, are you alive?" It struck me weird. I hadn't heard from her in so long. I'd forgotten what her voice sounded like. I hadn't realized just how long it had been. I quickly typed back, "Yeah, I'm good. Just work and stuff, you know how it is. She responded with a few short words, yeah. Okay. And then she didn't text me back for several hours. A sinking feeling hit me, like I was just getting a glimpse of something bigger. When she did reply, it wasn't what I was expecting. The message was blunt, I don't know if I should keep trying, you know? It's been months. I haven't heard from you. I know you're busy, but this is just weird now. I'm not sure what happened to our friendship. It feels like you ghosted me. And that was when it hit me. I hadn't ghosted her intentionally, but I had absolutely ghosted her. I was so caught up in my own stuff that I had completely disregarded her feelings. I'd gotten too comfortable with the idea that Jess would always be there, that I could just reach out when I had the energy, and everything would be fine. But Jess had been hurt. And she wasn't mad, she wasn't angry at me, but she had been waiting for me to show up for her, and I just hadn't. I sat there staring at the message for a long time, trying to figure out what to say. How do you apologize for something like this? How do you even begin to fix a friendship that you've let fall apart because you were too wrapped up in your own life? I responded with a heartfelt message, apologizing profusely for not being there for her. I told her everything I'd been dealing with, not as an excuse, but to explain why I had been so distant. I told her that I missed her, that I needed her in my life, and that I was sorry for making her feel like she didn't matter. I expected her to be angry, or at the very least, distant. But she wasn't. She was understanding, and she was kind. She told me that it had been really hard for her, that she missed me too, but that she couldn't keep being the one to reach out when I wasn't putting in the effort. She said that she was willing to give it another shot, but I had to make it clear that I wanted this friendship to be something I valued. I told her I did. I told her I always had. I promised her that I would be there, really there, this time. But the thing is, it wasn't the same anymore. I had waited too long. The distance had already put a strain on our relationship, and while we were still friends, it wasn't the same as it once had been. I had to rebuild her trust, and I had to put in the effort to show her that I truly cared. That would take time. It wouldn't be quick or easy, but I was ready to do the work. The lesson here is simple: don't take your friends for granted. Don't assume they'll always be around, no matter how busy you are. People need you just as much as you need them, and if you neglect them, you might lose them. I didn't think I could lose Jess, but I came dangerously close to doing just that. Now, I try to be more mindful. I text her back right away. I check in on her, and when she calls, I pick up. Because I never want to let a friendship slip through my fingers like that again. TIFU by trying to surprise my girlfriend with a fancy dinner and ending up in the ER. So, let me preface this by saying I am usually not the kind of guy who does big, extravagant gestures. I like to think of myself as thoughtful, but not over the top. My girlfriend, on the other hand, is the kind of person who appreciates the little things. I've always been kind of a homebody, and I think we both enjoy the quieter nights in, especially after long, exhausting weeks of work. But lately, I've been feeling like I've fallen into a bit of a routine. It's always the same: dinner, Netflix, and then sleep. So, I decided I wanted to do something special for her. I wanted to surprise her with a fancy dinner at home, a real one, not just me ordering takeout. I'm not exactly a master chef, but I figured I could pull something off. Plus, how hard could it be to make a romantic dinner? It's just food, right? Yeah, I should have known better. I started the day with all the best intentions. I'd planned everything out. I had a menu of what I thought would be a nice 3-course meal, an appetizer, a main dish, and dessert. Nothing too crazy, but just enough to impress. For the appetizer, I chose a simple bruschetta. For the main dish, I decided on homemade lasagna. Yeah, lasagna. I figured if I could pull it off, it would show her that I went all out. Finally, for dessert, I thought I'd try my hand at chocolate lava cakes. After all, who doesn't like molten chocolate? I spent the whole afternoon prepping. I wasn't in the kitchen for a few hours, but I had this sense of accomplishment, thinking about how much she would appreciate the effort. She works a lot, and I really wanted to show her how much I care. Around 5 p.m., she called me to let me know she was on her way home. I was all set. The house smelled amazing, I had candles lit, and the table was set with the best wine glasses I could find. I thought, wow, I'm really going to knock this out of the park. Then, disaster struck. I had never actually made lasagna before. I'd watched a couple of YouTube tutorials, so I thought I knew what I was doing. I had a large pan, and I had everything prepared: noodles, sauce, cheese. But I underestimated how long it would take to layer all the ingredients in the pan. As I started putting everything together, I realized the pan I had was too small. The noodles wouldn't fit. In my attempt to force them into place, I accidentally splashed hot marinara sauce all over the kitchen, including on my hands. Now, I have a pretty low pain tolerance, and I yelped in pain as the sauce seared my skin. But I didn't have time to deal with it, there was no going back now. So, I sucked it up, cleaned up as much of the mess as I could, and tried to salvage the lasagna. At this point, I was running out of time. My girlfriend would be home soon. I couldn't stop to nurse the burn on my hand, so I just wrapped it in a towel and kept going. I put the lasagna in the oven, hoping for the best. While that was baking, I turned to my next task, the chocolate lava cakes. The recipe seemed pretty straightforward, but I was starting to realize I'd been a bit overly ambitious. The batter needed to set in the fridge for at least 30 minutes before baking, but I didn't have time for that. Instead, I quickly mixed everything together and spooned it into ramekins. I thought it would be fine, right? I'd never made these before, but how hard could it be? I popped the cakes in the oven and quickly checked the lasagna. To my horror, it had spilled over the sides, and the cheese was burning on the edges. The house was starting to smell like burnt cheese, and I was getting panicked. I wiped my brow, which was now slick with sweat, and tried to salvage everything. At this point, my girlfriend was only 10 minutes away, and there was no turning back. I decided to try plating the appetizer, at least I could make it look nice. The bruschetta was simple enough, but the bread had gotten soggy while I was running around trying to manage everything else. I was just about to give up when I heard her key in the door. She was home. I had no choice but to power through. I greeted her at the door with a big smile, even though inside I was a nervous wreck. She looked at the set table, the wine glasses, the candles, and smiled. "This looks amazing," she said. I felt a rush of pride, but I knew deep down I was in for a disaster. I led her to the table and served the bruschetta. It wasn't perfect, but it was edible, and I was just glad it wasn't a total flop. She took a bite and complimented me on how good it tasted. This gave me a little confidence. Maybe I could still make this work. But then I went into the kitchen to check on the lasagna. It had somehow shifted in the oven, and the noodles had completely collapsed into a mushy, unrecognizable mess. The lasagna looked like a soggy, cheesy disaster. I couldn't even begin to fix it. My hand was still stinging from the burn, and I was starting to feel the weight of the situation. I quickly pulled the lasagna out of the oven, hoping that the chocolate lava cakes might redeem everything. I checked the cakes. They looked fine on the outside, but when I cut into one to serve it, I realized they had completely overcooked. The inside was a solid lump of chocolate instead of gooey molten lava. I tried to salvage them by adding whipped cream and some berries, but there was no hiding the fact that they were more like chocolate bricks than decadent desserts. By this point, my girlfriend was starting to notice the chaos in the kitchen. She gave me a concerned look and asked, "Are you okay? You're looking a little frazzled." I just nodded, trying to smile, but I could feel the panic rising. I handed her a plate with the ruined lasagna and the sad excuse for a chocolate lava cake, and she took a bite of each. She didn't say anything right away, but I could see her trying to keep a straight face. Finally, she gently placed her fork down and said, "Honey, what happened? This doesn't taste like you put a lot of effort into it." I almost collapsed from embarrassment. I tried to explain everything, but by then, I was too overwhelmed to even make sense of what had happened. She took pity on me, but it was clear that the evening was a bust. I didn't give up though. I decided to take her to the ER, where I ended up getting my hand checked out because of the burn. The whole night turned into an emergency room adventure, and by the time we got back home, we were both exhausted and frustrated. In the end, we got some fast food, curled up on the couch, and just laughed about how the whole evening had gone off the rails. It was a total disaster, but at least she appreciated the thought, even if the execution was a mess. The burn on my hand wasn't serious, and the ER visit wasn't anything major, but I learned a few important lessons. First, never try to cook something you've never made before when you're under pressure. Second, maybe take a cooking class before attempting a 3-course meal for your girlfriend. And finally, sometimes, the best thing you can do is just laugh at yourself when everything goes wrong. To my girlfriend, if you're reading this, I promise I'll stick to takeout next time. TIFU by accidentally sending a romantic text to my boss instead of my girlfriend. So, this happened yesterday, and I'm still mortified about it. I'm not even sure how to handle it, but I figured if I'm going to make it through this embarrassing situation, I might as well share it here and hopefully get some advice or at least some sympathy. It started as an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was at work, sitting at my desk, sipping my coffee, and getting ready for the day. I'd been seeing this girl, Jenna, for a couple of months now, and things were going well between us. We'd even been talking about making things more official, but we weren't quite there yet. Still, we were really into each other, and everything seemed great. I work in a medium-sized marketing firm. I'm not high up in the company, but I've got a decent role, and I'm on good terms with my boss, Greg. Greg is a pretty chill guy, but I'll admit that he can be a bit of a flirt at times. He's in his late 40s, and he's married, but he's got that suave, confident energy that some people just seem to have. He's been known to make some offhand comments now and then that make me cringe, but I've always tried to shrug it off. Anyway, so yesterday morning, I was texting Jenna. We'd been talking about going to this new sushi place in town that had just opened. She was really excited about it, and I was trying to keep the conversation flirty without being too forward. At one point, I sent a message that was meant to be playful and affectionate. I texted, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I've been thinking about you all day. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." I hit send, and immediately I was caught up in my work. I had a couple of deadlines to meet, and things were getting a little hectic. I needed to get some reports out for a client, so I was focused on that. But here's where things went wrong. You see, at the same time, I was also texting Greg. We had a few things to discuss about a project, and I was updating him on some of the things I was working on. The text conversation with Greg had been going back and forth throughout the morning, and his number was right next to Jenna's in my contacts. Now, normally, I'm pretty good about keeping things organized on my phone, but this time, I wasn't paying close enough attention. I opened my text app, saw the message from Jenna, and without thinking, I quickly replied to it. I didn't check who the message was going to, and I just typed out a quick response, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I've been thinking about you all day. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time." Only, I didn't send it to Jenna. I sent it to Greg. Yes, I accidentally sent a romantic message meant for my girlfriend to my boss. The second I hit send, I realized what I had done. My heart dropped to my stomach. I felt like I was going to pass out. I immediately grabbed my phone to see if I could unsend it, but of course, I couldn't. It had already been delivered. I stared at the message for a solid minute, hoping it would magically disappear. It didn't. I quickly typed a follow-up message, hoping to salvage something from the situation. I was trying to play it off like it was a mistake, but I had no idea what to say. I ended up typing, "Oops, sorry, that was meant for someone else. My bad." It didn't help. Greg didn't respond right away, and my anxiety levels were skyrocketing. I sat there, staring at my phone, hoping that he wouldn't say anything about it. But of course, it's Greg. He's the type of guy who finds humor in almost everything, even in the most awkward situations. And sure enough, not long after, my phone buzzed. Greg, you sure? Because that's a pretty sweet message. If I'm being honest, I'm flattered. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just leave the office and never return. My face was bright red, and I was absolutely mortified. How could I explain that I wasn't secretly in love with my boss? How could I get out of this? I immediately tried to call him, but he didn't pick up. I texted him again, saying something like, Greg, please. I really didn't mean to send that to you. It was meant for my girlfriend. I promise. He finally called me back about 10 minutes later. When I picked up the phone, he was laughing. Not in a mean way, but like he genuinely found the whole situation hilarious. Greg, you've got to be kidding me, man. That's some next-level awkwardness right there. But don't worry, I won't hold it against you. Just don't ever send me another message like that, all right? I tried to apologize a few more times, but he just kept laughing it off. He told me that it was an honest mistake and that I should just make sure I double-check my messages next time. It was a relief, but also a huge weight on my shoulders. The fact that he was laughing made it slightly better, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this would be something I'd never live down. The worst part? Jenna hadn't replied to my original message, so now I was sweating bullets, wondering if she had seen it. I immediately shot her a text, saying, Hey, I think I might have sent you a message by mistake. Just ignore it if it was weird. I'm sorry if it came off strange. She responded almost immediately, What do you mean? I didn't get anything weird from you. I was honestly relieved, but at the same time, I still felt like an idiot. How had I been so careless? The rest of the day was a blur. I was on edge, constantly thinking about what had happened. Luckily, Greg didn't bring it up again, but I knew it was probably going to be something that would be joked about for a while. Today, I saw him in the office kitchen, and he just grinned at me and said, Hey, no more love confessions, all right? I laughed awkwardly and nodded. Honestly, I'm still cringing. I'm not sure if I'll ever live it down. So yeah, that's the story of how I accidentally sent a romantic text to my boss instead of my girlfriend. Moral of the story? Always double-check your messages before hitting send, especially when it's about love, and especially when it's for your boss. Wish me luck. I'm going to need it. TIFU by trying to impress my date with a home-cooked meal and almost burning down my apartment. So, let me start by saying I'm not a terrible cook, but I'm also not some Gordon Ramsay-level chef. I can make basic stuff, pasta, stir-fries, the occasional chicken. Nothing fancy. But when I started seeing Sarah, a girl I met through a mutual friend, I really wanted to impress her. She's one of those people who seems to have their life together, perfect job, great sense of humor, always put together. She was out of my league, honestly, but I had to at least try to keep up. After a few dates, we'd been talking about cooking together, and she mentioned how much she liked food made from scratch. I was all in. I thought, hey, what better way to impress her than with a homemade dinner? I decided I'd cook her a nice meal at my place. It would be intimate, cozy, and totally nonchalant, nothing that screamed I'm trying too hard, but still enough to show I was thoughtful and capable. After a bit of research, I settled on making chicken parmesan with a side of garlic bread. Simple, right? Maybe a little too ambitious for someone who typically just microwaves frozen pizza, but it felt doable. The day of the date, I ran out to the grocery store to grab everything I needed. Chicken breasts, breadcrumbs, mozzarella, spaghetti sauce, garlic, butter, and, because I'm a man of class, a bottle of red wine. I was on a mission. I grabbed everything I thought I'd need and even threw in a bag of pre-washed salad to make myself look extra fancy. As I checked out, I felt pretty good about myself. I was going to knock this dinner out of the park. I got back home and immediately started prepping. I set everything out: chicken, flour, breadcrumbs, eggs, etc., and started with the garlic bread. I figured it'd be easy enough to get that done first and pop it in the oven while I worked on the chicken. I preheated the oven, slathered butter on the bread, sprinkled garlic, and set it in. It was supposed to bake for about 15 minutes, and I figured I had just enough time to bread the chicken and start on the sauce. Now, I've never deep-fried anything before. I'm not exactly a seasoned cook in that regard. But I figured it couldn't be that hard. I filled up a frying pan with oil, heated it up, and started breading the chicken. It was going smoothly enough, but I made the rookie mistake of turning the heat up too high. My pan was smoking in no time, but I didn't think much of it. After all, I was focused on the chicken, right? The bread was almost done, and I checked on it. It was golden brown, so I pulled it out of the oven and set it aside. I glanced over at the pan and realized there was an alarming amount of smoke billowing from it. The oil was starting to bubble more than I was comfortable with, but I was already committed. The chicken needed to go in. I carefully dropped the first piece into the pan. It sizzled violently, but I kept my cool. I put in the second piece, and that's when it happened. The oil splashed. Not a small splash either, a full-on splatter. It hit the burner on the stove and, in a split second, I saw it: flames. A fireball shot up from the stove, and in the chaos, I panicked. I pulled the pan off the burner without thinking and accidentally knocked over the bottle of oil. Oil spilled across the stove, and the flames shot higher. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I grabbed the closest thing I could find to put out the fire, one of those small dish towels you hang on the oven. I wasn't thinking clearly, but somehow, I thought that might help. As soon as the towel touched the flames, they spread even more. The towel was soaked in oil, and it instantly ignited. Now there were two fires. One on the stove, one on the towel. I ran to grab something else, but I didn't even know what. I was about to panic when I remembered the fire extinguisher under the sink. I yanked it out, but in my haste, I dropped it. It fell to the floor with a loud crash, and the fire kept burning. I could hear Sarah knocking on the door. She'd arrived, probably expecting a calm, nice dinner. But instead, she was about to walk into a scene straight out of a disaster movie. In a complete state of disbelief, I finally managed to grab the fire extinguisher again and spray it all over the kitchen. White powder exploded everywhere, covering the stove, the counter, the floor, everything. The fire was out. But the damage was done. When Sarah knocked again, I ran to the door, opened it, and greeted her with a sheepish smile. She stood there, frozen, staring at me with wide eyes as she took in the scene behind me. There I was, covered in flour, breadcrumbs, and powder from the extinguisher, with the smell of burnt food and oil filling the air. Hi, I said, clearly looking like I had just been through a war zone. She blinked a couple of times. What happened? I had no idea what to say. I tried to cook dinner. It didn't go well. I led her inside, and she took one look at the kitchen and gasped. There was oil all over the floor, a burnt towel still hanging from the stove, and the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfectly golden chicken sitting in a ruined, charred pan. She took a step back. Should I leave? She asked, her voice barely hiding the laughter she was clearly trying to suppress. Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't blame you, I said, running my hand through my hair in frustration. This was a disaster. We both stood there for a moment in awkward silence, and then she broke the tension by bursting into laughter. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm impressed, in a weird way. Yeah, I should be too, right? I replied, half laughing, half cringing. She offered to help clean up, which I couldn't believe, but I couldn't just let her do everything. We spent the next 45 minutes scrubbing down the kitchen, and I ended up calling for takeout. I didn't even have a working oven anymore. We sat down, both trying to calm down from the absurdity of the situation, and ended up having a pretty good time, despite the mess. In the end, Sarah and I still see each other. It wasn't a romance killer, just a funny story to tell friends later. But I learned my lesson. Don't try to impress someone with cooking if you don't actually know what you're doing, and maybe buy a fire extinguisher before you start deep frying chicken. It all started a few weeks ago when my girlfriend, Jess, and I decided to go on a spontaneous weekend getaway. She had been stressing out about work, and I thought it would be a good idea to take her somewhere quiet and relaxing to help her unwind. We settled on a secluded cabin in the mountains, just the two of us, a few hours away from the city. The place looked perfect, remote, cozy, and surrounded by nature. A real disconnect from the world kind of spot. I thought I was being a great boyfriend, organizing this whole thing. I was determined to make everything go smoothly. I planned the trip, packed our bags, arranged for all the food and supplies, and even preloaded a playlist with all our favorite songs for the car ride. I figured it would be an easy weekend full of hiking, stargazing, and catching up on some much-needed relaxation. What could go wrong, right? I'm not going to lie, I'm the type of person who tends to overplan everything. I make lists for my lists, and I'm pretty meticulous when it comes to making sure every little detail is covered. Jess, on the other hand, is much more laid back. She's the kind of person who forgets to pack half of what she needs, but she's so chill about it that I end up taking care of everything anyway. So we set off on the trip, and things started off perfectly. We drove up to the cabin, listened to music, and laughed about silly inside jokes. It was exactly what I had hoped for, a peaceful retreat where we could escape the chaos of everyday life. We arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon, and it was everything I imagined, rustic, charming, with large windows that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding forest. Jess was immediately taken with the place and loved the idea of having our own little private haven. I showed her around, unpacked our things, and set up the cozy living room for us to enjoy once the sun went down. Everything was going smoothly. That's when things started to go south. As I was in the middle of setting up the fire pit outside for some post-dinner marshmallow roasting, Jess came up to me with a look of concern on her face. "Hey, babe, did you pack the the thing?" she asked. I frowned, trying to make sense of what she meant. "The thing? What thing?" The thing," she repeated, looking even more anxious now. I stared at her, completely confused. "What are you talking about?" She sighed dramatically and pulled out her phone, tapping through a couple of screens before showing me a picture of what looked like a small, portable projector. "I thought you packed this. For movie night." I froze. My stomach dropped. I had completely forgotten about the projector. In my quest to meticulously plan every other part of the trip, I had completely overlooked the one thing Jess had really been looking forward to. "Wait, so you're telling me you wanted to watch movies out here?" I asked, feeling like a total idiot. "Yeah, I was hoping we could snuggle up by the fire, have some popcorn, and watch something cozy under the stars," she said, her excitement fading into disappointment. I felt terrible. This wasn't just a little thing, this was something Jess had been really looking forward to. And I had let her down. I spent the next 20 minutes apologizing, pacing around like a lunatic, and brainstorming how I could fix this. Maybe we could drive into town to rent one? But then I realized we were in the middle of nowhere, and the nearest town was a solid 45-minute drive away. Then, inspiration struck. I remembered something I had seen on the cabin's website. There was an old-fashioned DVD player with a stack of DVDs available for guests to use. Maybe it wouldn't be as glamorous as watching something on a projector, but at least it would give us a movie night. I rushed inside to check the DVD collection, and sure enough, there were a bunch of classics, romantic comedies, thrillers, family-friendly films. Perfect. I grabbed a random one, popped it into the player, and hurried back outside to Jess, hoping this would redeem my earlier mistake. But when I hit play, something strange happened. The DVD started playing, but it wasn't a movie. It was an instructional video on how to properly operate the fire pit. It was a 15-minute tutorial with a guy in a flannel shirt talking about safety procedures, wood placement, and how to properly extinguish the fire. I froze. Jess stared at the TV in utter confusion. Babe? Is this supposed to be the movie? I facepalmed so hard I nearly bruised my palm. No. That's not right. Hold on, let me fix it. I fumbled with the remote, trying to get the damn thing to stop. But instead of ejecting, it started playing a new DVD. This time, it was a documentary about the history of fire pits. Seriously? I said in disbelief. What is happening with this thing? Jess started laughing. At first, it was a quiet chuckle, but as the absurdity of the situation sank in, she couldn't stop herself. She laughed so hard that tears were rolling down her cheeks, and at that point, I couldn't help but join in. I had officially made the situation 10 times worse by somehow managing to select the two most bizarre DVDs possible. Here we were, in the middle of nowhere, with a fire pit safety video and a documentary about fire pits instead of a romantic movie under the stars. I was mortified. At this point, we both realized the night wasn't going as planned, and we decided to make the best of it. We started a real fire outside, had some wine, and even got into a playful discussion about how fire pits had clearly become the most important aspect of the weekend. But the whole time, Jess couldn't stop laughing about the DVD mishap. By the time we finally went to bed, she had reminded me about 10 times how special the fire pit video was. The next morning, as I was packing up our things to leave, I noticed something on the DVD shelf, a small stack of DVDs that had somehow escaped my attention earlier. I pulled out the movie I had actually meant to play that night. The irony of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. It was a romantic comedy that Jess and I had both seen a dozen times. I had literally packed the movie, but in my rush to make everything perfect, I had overlooked it in the most ridiculous way possible. To say I felt like an idiot is an understatement. But on the plus side, Jess and I now have a hilarious story about our weekend getaway, and she still teases me about the fire pit saga. And as for the trip? Despite my best efforts, it turned out to be an unforgettable weekend, not because everything went according to plan, but because it was so absurdly imperfect that it became a perfect memory in its own right. So yeah. I'll be double-checking my packing list next time. TIFU by trying to impress my friends with my cooking skills and almost setting my apartment on fire. I've always been a pretty decent cook. Nothing fancy, just basic stuff, pasta, scrambled eggs, stir-fries, things that a person who doesn't want to live off microwave meals can easily pull off. However, I'd recently discovered a new passion for baking, specifically making sourdough bread. I had read tons of articles, watched videos, and even bought a few baking books. In short, I was prepared. But, for whatever reason, I thought I'd need to raise the stakes a little bit to show off for a small dinner party I was hosting that night. A group of my closest friends, who are all way better cooks than I am, were coming over. I was determined to impress them. I had this genius idea to make the most incredible homemade pizza from scratch. The kind of pizza where you make the dough, sauce, and toppings yourself, not just some pre-made dough from the store and Jared tomato sauce. This was my moment to show off my newfound baking expertise. I spent hours earlier in the day prepping the dough, letting it rise, and getting everything just right. When my friends arrived, everything was set up in the kitchen, fresh dough rising on the counter, homemade tomato sauce simmering, and the kitchen smelling like heaven. They were immediately impressed when they saw the spread. As they filed into the living room, I couldn't help but feel a little smug, like I was about to be crowned king of pizza. I was casually explaining to them how I spent a good portion of the morning getting everything just perfect when I realized that I hadn't turned on the oven yet. This is where things started to go south. The pizza dough was supposed to be cooked at a ridiculously high temperature, like 475 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way higher than your typical home oven. So, I quickly cranked it up to 475 degrees Fahrenheit, but I forgot one crucial thing: I hadn't cleared out the oven. I had the idea that I could just shove everything in there without thinking much about it. I'd used the oven the night before, and there were a couple of random items I had left in the oven, mostly old baking sheets, some baking paper, and even a half-full jar of olive oil I had forgotten to take out. Now, I didn't realize this at the time, but that olive oil jar was about to be the death of my dinner party. I casually told everyone that I'd pop the pizzas in the oven in just a minute and went to the bathroom to freshen up. But I didn't even get to the door before I heard it, a loud pop, followed by a sizzling noise. My heart sank. I rushed back into the kitchen, and that's when I saw it, flames. Apparently, the heat of the oven had somehow ignited the half-full olive oil jar that was sitting in the oven. The jar wasn't even sealed properly. The flames had spread across the baking sheets and everything around it was going up like a bonfire. I froze. I think I stood there for a solid 5 seconds, my brain trying to process what was happening. The last thing I wanted was to look like a complete fool in front of my friends, but here I was about to burn my apartment down. Instinct took over. I yelled for everyone to get out of the kitchen, but it was too late, the fire was already starting to spread beyond the oven. My heart was racing as I tried to turn off the oven, but I couldn't get a good grip on the handle because the heat was unbearable. Panicking, I grabbed a dish rag and tried to open the oven door with it, but it was useless. The flames were rising fast, and I realized I was in way over my head. One of my friends, Josh, who has a lot of experience with cooking and worked in kitchens for years, stepped in and told me to grab the fire extinguisher. He kept his cool while I was losing mine. I ran to the closet to grab the fire extinguisher, but of course, it was buried behind a pile of old cleaning supplies I never use. By the time I finally got it, the flames were so high I wasn't sure if it was even going to help. Josh finally took the extinguisher from me and expertly sprayed it into the oven. The powder filled the air, and everything went white and smoky. The kitchen was a mess of burnt food, smoke, and chaos. We all rushed out of the apartment to get some fresh air, coughing and trying to shake off the overwhelming smell of charred pizza dough and fire extinguisher powder. To make matters worse, the fire alarm went off the moment we stepped outside, signaling that the whole building was now aware of my culinary catastrophe. My neighbors were probably gathering outside, wondering what the hell had just happened. After the flames were out, I spent a solid 45 minutes cleaning up the mess. The oven was destroyed. The pizza dough I had worked so hard on? Burnt to a crisp. The homemade tomato sauce I had spent so long simmering? Charred beyond recognition. Even the baking sheets had to be thrown away because they were so badly burned. As for my friends, they were surprisingly chill about the whole thing. They laughed it off and kept making jokes about how I was going for the crispy pizza and that it was a new style. But deep down, I was mortified. I had been so proud of myself for making everything from scratch, and instead, I ended up almost setting my apartment on fire and ruining an entire evening of cooking. We ended up ordering pizza from a local place, which, ironically, turned out to be way better than my failed attempt. In the end, we still had a good time, but I definitely learned a few important lessons that night. 1. Always check your oven before you preheat it. 2. Don't let your ego get the best of you when cooking. 3. The fire extinguisher is your friend. Know where it is. Oh, and my neighbors? Well, they were a bit more judgmental when I bumped into them the next day. They didn't even ask how the pizza turned out. But hey, at least I'm not banned from hosting anymore, just no more cooking for the foreseeable future. So yeah, that's how I tried to impress my friends with my cooking skills and nearly burned down my apartment. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally starting a small fire in my apartment and having to explain to my neighbor that I wasn't secretly a fire wizard. I'll start off by saying that I'm a pretty normal 28-year-old guy living in a decent-sized apartment in a not-so-decent part of town. I'm a professional in tech, spend a lot of time in front of a screen, and my social life is mostly limited to Netflix, my couch, and occasionally ordering takeout. The place is small, cozy, and most importantly, I've always felt safe here. No crazy neighbors, no weird smells, and definitely no fires. That is, until today. It all started when I got home after a particularly draining day at work. I had been staring at my computer screen for hours, writing code, debugging endless errors, and attending pointless meetings. You know, the usual tech stuff. I hadn't eaten all day because I had been too caught up in the work grind, so I decided to whip up a quick dinner. Something simple, maybe throw a frozen pizza in the oven, and then binge-watch something on Netflix. Now, for some background, I live in an apartment building, and the walls are kind of thin. My neighbor, who lives in the unit next to mine, is this older lady named Mrs. Jenkins. She's super sweet, always says hello when we bump into each other in the hallway, and even gave me a plant for my birthday last year. The plant has since died, but I'm sure she'd understand. She's very grandmotherly, always looking out for everyone, but she doesn't hesitate to let you know if she's upset. I'd say we're on good terms, though we don't exactly hang out or chat much. Back to the story, so, I put the frozen pizza in the oven, set the timer, and then I got distracted. It's easy to get distracted when you're by yourself in an apartment, right? You start scrolling through your phone or check email, maybe look at a few random YouTube videos. That's exactly what I did. I was zoning out for maybe 15 minutes, totally forgetting that my pizza was cooking. The next thing I know, I start smelling something. At first, I thought it was just the usual burnt smell when something's overcooked. But then, the smell got worse, like a smoky, acrid stench that made my eyes water. I turned around, and to my horror, there was smoke billowing from the oven. In a panic, I rushed to open it, but as soon as I cracked the door, flames shot up, and my once beautiful pizza was now a blackened, flaming disaster. Now, at this point, my brain went into full-on crisis mode. What do I do? What do I do? I could hear Mrs. Jenkins through the wall, probably hearing me in a mild panic. So, I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the first thing I could find to put out the fire. Naturally, it was a dish towel. I don't know why I thought that would work, but it didn't. Instead, it caught on fire as well, making my panic double in size. I couldn't find my fire extinguisher because, apparently, I didn't actually have one, so I did the next best thing. I grabbed the baking soda from the pantry and threw it into the oven, hoping that would put the fire out. I thought I'd seen someone do it on a cooking show once, so it seemed like a smart move. It wasn't. The fire didn't go out. If anything, it just made a mess. Now, I had a smelly oven full of burnt pizza, a soggy, charred dish towel, and an apartment that smelled like a war zone. I grabbed my phone to call 911. But then, just as I was about to dial, I noticed smoke starting to creep into the hallway. This wasn't just a kitchen disaster anymore, it was rapidly turning into an apartment-wide catastrophe. I panicked and hit the 911 button, but before the operator could pick up, I heard a knock on the door. Mrs. Jenkins. She had obviously smelled the smoke and was now standing outside my door, probably concerned that I had accidentally turned my place into a barbecue. I opened the door, and she was standing there, wide-eyed, holding a fire extinguisher. I saw the smoke, she said. I thought I should bring this over just in case. I was mortified. I had never been so embarrassed in my entire life. There I was, standing in front of my neighbor, looking like a man who had set his own kitchen on fire in the most incompetent way possible. My face was bright red, and I could feel the heat from the flames still sizzling in the oven. Mrs. Jenkins, bless her heart, didn't even skip a beat. She marched right in without waiting for an invitation and started spraying the fire extinguisher into my oven, putting out the last of the flames. Let's get this mess cleaned up, she said as though this was just another Tuesday for her. At this point, I didn't know what to say. I was standing there, speechless, as Mrs. Jenkins took control of the situation. She's a small woman, but she clearly knows her way around a fire extinguisher. She cleaned up the charred pizza remnants and offered me a hug. That's when I realized she was treating this whole situation like it was just an everyday mishap. She was unfazed by the fact that I had nearly burned down the entire apartment complex. Once the fire was completely out, she gave me some of her famous homemade cookies to calm my nerves and went back to her unit. I just stood there for a few minutes, in disbelief that my day had taken such a ridiculous turn. As if the story wasn't embarrassing enough, I had to call the landlord later to explain what had happened and assure him that everything was fine. Mrs. Jenkins, the absolute legend, gave me a glowing review when he called to check on the situation. Apparently, she had told him I was handling the fire with great vigor and that a few extra sprinkles of baking soda never hurt anyone. I don't think the landlord believed her. Moral of the story, always check your pizza. Also, get a fire extinguisher. And maybe, just maybe, don't trust a dish towel to put out a flame. Oh, and never ever, let Mrs. Jenkins see you flail around in a kitchen disaster, because she will show up with an extinguisher and possibly save your life. Also, get your own damn plant next time. Anyway, I'm thinking about sending Mrs. Jenkins a thank you card, but I'm also a little worried she'll think I'm secretly a fire wizard in training. TLDR, set my pizza on fire, tried to put it out with a dish towel, and had to be saved by my neighbor who brought over a fire extinguisher and didn't even bat an eye. TIFU by getting my roommate's pet ferret stuck in the ceiling, causing a massive disaster and nearly ruining my relationship with my best friend. I've always been a bit of a disaster when it comes to living with roommates, and this particular situation is proof of that. My best friend, Dave, and I had been roommates for about 2 years when he decided to adopt a ferret. He had been talking about getting one for a while, but I never took him seriously. Who would, right? A ferret? In a small apartment in the city? But apparently, he did some research, and after weeks of convincing me it would be fine and really fun, I caved. The ferret was named Whiskers, cute little thing, mostly brown with a white underbelly. It was, of course, an absolute terror. Whiskers would run all over the apartment at top speed, jumping on anything and everything. It was impossible to leave anything on the floor without Whiskers deciding it was his new playground. Socks? Gone. Shoes? Chewed up. My textbooks? Ripped to shreds. At first, I was just mildly annoyed by it. I didn't have much choice. It was Dave's pet, and he loved the little guy. But things started to escalate. One day, while I was working from home, I heard some weird scratching sounds coming from the ceiling. I assumed it was just the pipes, old building, and all that. But the sound kept happening. It wasn't just random noises, it was rhythmic, like something was moving around up there. I mentioned it to Dave, who didn't seem too concerned. Oh, it's probably just the ferret, he said. He gets into places he shouldn't. I laughed it off. The idea of a ferret crawling around in the walls seemed ridiculous. How could that even happen? I didn't think much of it until the next day. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the sound again. Scratching. This time, though, it was followed by a little thud and then silence. I figured it was Whiskers again, probably trying to hide in some corner or behind the couch, so I didn't think much of it. I was wrong. Very wrong. A few hours later, I was in the kitchen making lunch when Dave came bursting into the room, panicked. His face was pale, and his voice was shaky. Dude, have you seen Whiskers? He asked, looking around the room like the ferret was going to pop out of the fridge or something. I can't find him anywhere. I froze. What do you mean, you can't find him? I've checked all the usual places, he said, his voice getting more frantic. Under the couch, behind the TV, in his cage, nowhere. I even looked in the bathroom. His eyes widened. Do you think he could have gotten into the walls? At this point, I froze. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. That sound I'd heard earlier? I started to connect the dots. Whiskers had somehow managed to get into the ceiling. How? I have no idea. Maybe he crawled through a vent or found a hole somewhere in the drywall. All I knew was that my worst fear was coming true. Dave, I said slowly, I think Whiskers might be in the ceiling. We both stood there in stunned silence for a second before Dave bolted for the nearest door, leading to the attic hatch. His hands were shaking as he tried to open it. I followed him, heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. We climbed up into the attic, which, to our dismay, was barely big enough to move around in. It was a cramped space, filled with old boxes and insulation. Dave immediately began ripping through the insulation, pulling things down, yelling Whiskers' name. I joined in, crawling around, trying to see if I could find some sign of him. Minutes passed. Then, I heard it. A soft, high-pitched squeak. It came from above us. I looked up, and there it was, a small vent in the ceiling above us. Whiskers' little face was peering down, his tiny paws scratching at the metal grate. Whiskers! Dave shouted, relieved but also frantic. How the hell did you get up there? I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. There was a ferret in the ceiling, and somehow, it was my fault. I felt like a terrible roommate and even worse, a terrible friend. I had heard the scratching. I had heard it several times. Why hadn't I investigated sooner? After what felt like an eternity, we managed to get Whiskers out of the vent, thanks to a mix of weirdly creative thinking, a broomstick, a towel, and a lot of awkward positioning. We both breathed a huge sigh of relief when we finally had him in hand, though he was less than pleased. He scratched at us both like we had somehow wronged him. But that wasn't the worst part. As we were standing in the attic, holding the ferret and trying to figure out how to get back down, we heard a sudden noise. A loud cracking sound from below us. I looked at Dave, his face draining of color. No, I said, but it was already too late. The ceiling below us started to collapse. There was a huge crash as a section of drywall gave way, sending dust and debris down into the living room. Dave and I scrambled to the attic hatch, desperately trying to get down before the entire ceiling came down on us. But it was too late. By the time we made it downstairs, half the ceiling had already fallen, taking down light fixtures, bits of insulation, and a whole lot of dust. Our living room looked like a bomb had gone off. We stood there, dumbfounded. There was the mess of insulation, drywall, and broken furniture. Whiskers was perched on Dave's shoulder, looking completely unfazed, like he was the one who had caused the mess. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dave, looking shell-shocked, muttered something about calling the landlord. And that's when things took a turn for the worse. The landlord showed up an hour later. He wasn't exactly known for being understanding, but I thought maybe he would be lenient. Nope. He was livid. Apparently, we were responsible for the damage to the ceiling. Not only that, but he had already warned us about the building's condition. There were fines to pay, and repairs to be made, lots of them. That's when I really began to panic. This wasn't just about me and Dave anymore. We were facing serious costs. It was going to be a nightmare to fix everything, and I wasn't sure if our friendship would survive the fallout. But that's not where the story ends. We eventually got the ceiling fixed, and luckily, the landlord didn't charge us as much as we feared. But it took months to clean up the mess. And to make matters worse, Dave and I have been arguing more than usual ever since. It's like that ferret tore apart more than just the ceiling, it's like it tore apart a little bit of our friendship too. And that's how I ended up with a ruined living room, a massive repair bill, and a severely damaged relationship with my best friend, all because I ignored the sounds of a ferret crawling around in the ceiling. TLDR, adopted a ferret, ignored its weird behavior in the walls, ferret got stuck in the ceiling, entire ceiling collapsed, caused massive damage, ruined my friendship with my roommate. It all started with an innocent trip to the grocery store. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had been living together for about a year. We had a cozy little apartment, not too far from a bustling downtown area. I had just gotten off work, and Sarah had been planning a dinner for the two of us. She was cooking up a storm, her specialty, a homemade lasagna. Now, I'm not much of a cook, but I'm the type of guy who likes to contribute, so I agreed to run a few errands for her. One of those errands was to pick up some fresh herbs and vegetables from the grocery store. I didn't think much of it. It was a simple task. Grab the ingredients, maybe pick up a six-pack of beer, and head home. But, of course, I had no idea that this trip was going to set off a chain of events that would turn my life upside down. The grocery store was packed as usual. The shelves were lined with every type of product imaginable. I picked up the basil, the tomatoes, and some mozzarella. As I was walking down the aisles, I noticed a woman who caught my attention. She was standing by the deli counter, and for some reason, her presence felt oddly familiar. Maybe it was her smile, or the fact that I swear I had seen her before. But it wasn't until I took a few more steps and saw the back of her head that it hit me. This woman looked exactly like my ex, Emily. Now, I should preface this by saying that Emily and I hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years. We broke up in the most dramatic way possible, a blowout argument over something trivial. I think it was about my lack of enthusiasm for her soul-searching trip to Bali. I was devastated at the time, and for a while, I carried around some of that bitterness. But over the years, I'd managed to move on. I was happy with Sarah. We had a good thing going. I wasn't interested in rekindling anything with Emily, not in the slightest. But there she was. Or, at least, it looked like her. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I found myself walking closer, pretending to look at some olives on the shelf right next to the deli counter. The woman turned around briefly to grab a package of salami, and for a split second, I was sure it was Emily. The way she moved, the way she smiled, the exact shade of her hair. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was her. My heart started to race a little bit. Should I say something? Should I just leave her alone? I hadn't thought about Emily in ages, and now, here she was, standing just a few feet away from me. It was almost like fate, or some cosmic joke, pulling us back together. But then I remembered, I was with Sarah. Sarah, the love of my life. Emily was a thing of the past, and I needed to keep it that way. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and started texting Sarah. I wanted to get out of this situation before I did something stupid. Hey babe, I'm almost done, just grabbing a few more things. Be home soon. I glanced back at the woman, trying not to stare too long. She was still by the deli, chatting with a worker. I convinced myself it wasn't Emily. It couldn't be. I had seen Emily on Facebook a few months ago, and this woman didn't look quite the same. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But, of course, overthinking is exactly what I did. I couldn't stop wondering. What if it was her? What if I just pretended everything was fine and then ran into her again later, awkward and unresolved? I wasn't about to let that happen, so I made the decision to leave. Quickly. I turned on my heel and headed toward the checkout. As I did, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the woman was heading in the same direction. Panic hit me. Was she following me? Was she going to confront me? My mind raced with possible scenarios, most of them awkward and humiliating. In a brief moment of irrationality, I started to speedwalk toward the front of the store, hoping to get out of there as quickly as possible. That's when disaster struck. As I was pushing through the self-checkout line, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around, and there she was. The woman from the deli. She looked at me with a friendly, albeit slightly curious, expression. Hey, she said, this is going to sound really strange, but I think I know you. My stomach dropped. I froze. This was it. She recognized me. I could already feel my palms getting clammy. I looked at her, trying to force a smile. Sorry, I don't think so, I said, my voice higher than I meant it to be. I don't think we've met. Oh, no, she insisted. I swear I've seen you before. Do you have a brother who lives in this area? I was caught off guard by the question. I stammered, trying to think of a way out of this awkward situation. No, I don't. I mean, not that I know of. She smiled again, but this time, it seemed more like an awkward, forced smile. You really do look familiar, though, she said, her tone taking on a slightly puzzled edge. I didn't know what to say. I had to get out of there. But I couldn't just walk away from her. That would be rude, right? I think you might be mistaken, I said quickly, but, it was nice talking to you. Take care. I backed away from the conversation, trying to look casual, but inside, my heart was racing. I grabbed my bags and practically bolted out of the store, praying to God she wouldn't follow me out into the parking lot. I got to my car and quickly tossed the groceries into the back seat. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what the hell had just happened. What was I supposed to do now? I'd just had an awkward encounter with some stranger who might have been mistaken about who I was. But she had looked so familiar. I drove home, still feeling the sting of that awkward moment, trying to push it out of my mind. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself that I had overreacted. I had blown things way out of proportion. But then Sarah greeted me at the door, a big smile on her face. Hey, babe, I'm so glad you're home. Did you get everything? Yeah, I got everything, I replied, still trying to shake off the weird interaction. I walked into the kitchen, trying to act normal. Oh, and guess what, she said, following me. I saw something on Facebook today. It's so weird. Emily's back in town. I think she's, moving back here or something. My blood ran cold. I froze, staring at her. What? Yeah, Sarah continued, oblivious to the panic on my face. She posted about it on her Facebook. Something about reconnecting with old friends. I swallowed hard. When did she post this? A couple of hours ago. Why? I couldn't respond. The grocery store. The woman. Emily. I had just talked to her, at least, I thought I had. And that's when I realized something. I'd spent the entire evening in a state of panic over someone who wasn't even my ex. It wasn't Emily at all. It was someone who just looked like her. I felt like a total idiot. TIFU by accidentally sending an inappropriate text to my mom, and then trying to fix it. So, I guess I'll start by saying that my family is pretty chill when it comes to communication. We're a close-knit bunch, and we share a lot, mostly harmless stuff, like memes, news, and sometimes, really weird stuff that should probably stay in the not-for-family category. But overall, we all have a decent sense of humor, and there aren't many boundaries when it comes to what we talk about. Now, I want to clarify something before I continue. I am not a person who talks inappropriately to my mom. I mean, I'm an adult, but there are lines, you know? I don't send her anything weird, and she's not the type of person to send weird stuff either. That's why, when I sent that text the other day, I was genuinely horrified by what happened. It all started with a pretty typical day. I was hanging out with a friend of mine, let's call him Alex. Alex is one of those friends who has a knack for finding the most bizarre memes and sending them out of nowhere. He's also the friend who talks about things like conspiracy theories, dark humor, and occasionally, some NSFW stuff. He does it in the way that only a close friend can. I wasn't in the mood to talk about anything too heavy, so I was just chilling, scrolling through my phone, laughing at memes, and catching up with Alex's latest weird finds. One of the memes he sent me was a pretty raunchy joke that I found absolutely hilarious. It was one of those if you know types of jokes, and it was just borderline inappropriate enough to be funny, but not so over the top that it made me uncomfortable. I laughed, sent a couple of crying laughing emojis, and then proceeded to share it in our group chat with Alex and a few other friends. I don't remember exactly what happened next, But somewhere between laughing at the meme and trying to catch up on some messages, I noticed my phone was acting up a little. You know how sometimes, your phone autocorrects too much, and you end up accidentally texting someone the wrong thing? That's exactly what happened. Here's where the story takes a turn. I had been texting my mom about some random errand I had to run. My mom is a typical mom, super sweet, a little old-fashioned, but she's still very up-to-date with technology, so we text pretty frequently. I usually update her on random things like my work schedule or asking about family events. This day was no different. I sent her a message like, "Hey, I'll be over around 6 tonight for dinner. Anything I can bring?" But, as fate would have it, my fingers didn't quite do what I wanted them to do. I meant to respond to Alex's meme with LMAO, I love this, but somehow ended up sending it to my mom instead. And because the text I meant to send to Alex was about the meme, I didn't think much of it at first. But then, I reread the message I just sent my mom, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. The text I accidentally sent her wasn't the usual friendly "Hey mom, I'll be there soon," it was LMAO, I love this. And right below that, was the meme, an explicit one that had a crude image and a joke that was not something you should ever, under any circumstances, share with your mother. And as soon as I realized what I had done, my stomach dropped. Panic set in immediately. I felt like I was going to die on the spot. I'm a 27-year-old adult, and I've had my share of embarrassing moments, but this was next level. My mom was definitely going to call me out. I didn't even have time to process it fully before my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Excuse me? What's this?" I could feel my heart racing in my chest. My mom was always sweet and never judgmental, but this? This was something else. I had no idea how she was going to react. I frantically tried to come up with an explanation that would make sense but wouldn't make the situation worse. The text from her made it clear she wasn't mad yet, but I wasn't sure how much time I had before things went south. I tried to act normal. I quickly opened up my messages and saw the meme, now staring back at me like a cruel reminder of the horrific mistake I had just made. I stared at my phone screen for a few seconds, my mind racing. Should I just ignore it and pretend I sent the message by accident? Or should I face the awkwardness head-on? I decided to play it cool and go with the accidental text route. I typed out the fastest explanation I could muster, "Oh my gosh, I meant to send that to a friend. Totally didn't mean to send that to you. Sorry. I'll be over in an hour." It was a weak attempt at damage control, but I sent it anyway, hoping she would just laugh it off. But then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was her reply, "Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you were sharing memes with me now, that's a little much for me, haha." And then, as if I had been given a brief reprieve, she sent another message, "I'll see you in a bit, don't worry about it." I had dodged a bullet, or so I thought. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, when I showed up at her place for dinner, I tried to act normal. My mom, as always, greeted me with a big hug, and we chatted for a bit before sitting down to eat. Everything seemed fine, but then, out of nowhere, my mom brought up the text. "So, you're really getting into memes, huh?" she said with a smirk. "That one was, quite the choice. You sure you want to share those with me?" I could feel my face turning beet red. It wasn't like she was upset, but it was the way she said it, half teasing, half joking, that made me want to crawl under the table and disappear. I didn't mean to send that to you, Mom, I said, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. It was just a dumb mistake. Well, just don't send me anything like that again, she laughed, clearly trying to brush it off. But I could tell she was enjoying the fact that she had caught me in such an awkward situation. As we ate dinner, we ended up talking about everything but that text, and eventually, the awkwardness faded. But man, the whole thing really stuck with me. It's been a few days since it happened, and while my mom and I have moved on, I'll never look at memes the same way again. Now, every time I open my phone, I double-check who I'm sending things to, just to make sure I don't accidentally send anything else inappropriate to my mom again. Lesson learned, people. Always triple-check your texts. TIFU by accidentally sending a nude to my boss instead of my boyfriend. So, I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I've been working at a mid-sized marketing firm for the past 2 years. I've been with my boyfriend for about a year, and while our relationship has been great, we're still in that phase where we do a lot of texting throughout the day, sharing random thoughts, memes, and, yes, some spicy photos. Normally, I'm pretty cautious when it comes to sending pictures to anyone, but after a couple of months of talking about it, I thought I'd try something new and send him a photo. Now, let me set the scene for you. I'm in my office, at my desk, and the day's been going as usual. I've got a couple of meetings to attend, emails to respond to, and various tasks to finish up. My phone's sitting next to me, buzzing periodically with texts from my boyfriend. We had been having some pretty flirty conversations, and I felt like it was the perfect moment to spice things up a bit. I was sitting there, looking at the screen, thinking about how I could surprise him. So, I took a quick selfie in my office bathroom, nothing too crazy, just a cute and a bit sultry pic. The lighting was good, and I was feeling pretty confident about it. I snapped the picture, quickly edited it, and then went to send it. Here's where it all goes south. I have my boyfriend's contact saved with a very cute emoji next to his name, a little heart. I've always liked how his contact stands out in my list, so it's easy to find him. Now, in my office, we use Slack to communicate for work-related things, but I also have it set up to get personal texts. Since I've been using Slack for work non-stop, I've also linked my personal phone number to it so I can easily communicate with some colleagues if needed. While texting my boyfriend, I meant to send the picture to him via text, but for some strange reason, I had Slack open on my phone instead of my Messages app. So, I took a moment, went into my phone's app drawer, and, without realizing it, scrolled to my boss's name, thinking it was my boyfriend's. The weird thing was, I didn't even look at the name in the first place. I opened the chat, quickly attached the photo, and hit send before even thinking twice. But as soon as I saw the little sending bubble appear, my heart stopped. I don't know how it happened so quickly, but I instantly realized my mistake. I thought, no, that's not right. My stomach dropped as I saw that the message was sent to my boss, my 50-year-old, very professional, no-nonsense boss who has a wife and kids. I immediately went into panic mode, trying to figure out how to unsend the message, but, oh wait, Slack doesn't have an unsend feature for personal chats. I quickly opened the chat with my actual boyfriend, who, of course, was oblivious to the whole mess, and I messaged him frantically, I just sent a nude to my boss. I am literally about to die. Help. I started shaking so badly that I could barely type. Then, to make matters worse, my boss responded almost immediately with a short, but incredibly dry, I see. Just those 2 words, and nothing else. I froze. That was it. No explanation, no context, just a short, chilling response. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, hoping that somehow I was dreaming. But no, it was all too real. Now, I've never been more embarrassed in my life. I had no idea what to do. I could feel my face turning red, and the anxiety started to flood over me. I sat there for a solid minute, debating my options. Do I apologize immediately and risk it becoming a huge, awkward conversation? Do I try to pretend like nothing happened? Do I quit my job right now and change my identity? I started drafting an apology, but it came out like a complete train wreck. The words were all over the place, and I just couldn't seem to get it right. I figured the best course of action was to at least acknowledge what had happened and try to address it head-on. I typed, I'm so sorry. That was intended for someone else. Please disregard that message. It was awkward as hell, but I sent it anyway. My boss responded after what felt like an eternity of silence. He said, no problem. Just make sure that doesn't happen again. I sat there in stunned silence, letting the words sink in. I couldn't believe it. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't fire me or yell at me. He just let it go. But the thing is, I don't think I could ever look him in the eye again without cringing. I've been working with him for 2 years, and now I can't help but feel like every conversation is tinged with the image of that photo I sent him. I tried to recover from the situation, but I could tell things had shifted. Every time I walked into the office, I was hyper-aware of his presence. Every email or message from him felt like he was secretly judging me. It was an awful feeling. It's been a few weeks since the incident, and we've both acted like nothing happened. I've even gone out of my way to avoid any awkwardness, making sure to keep things strictly professional. But in the back of my mind, I'll never be able to forget the fact that my boss saw a picture that was meant for my boyfriend. So, yeah. That's how I accidentally sent a nude to my boss. Now, every time my phone buzzes, I double-check who I'm texting, especially if it's a flirty conversation. The worst part? My boyfriend still thinks it's hilarious. He keeps joking about it, asking if I want to send him another one so I can test out Slack's unsend feature. I guess at least I'll always have a great story for the office holiday party. TLDR, accidentally sent a nude to my boss instead of my boyfriend. He saw it and didn't make a big deal out of it, but now things are forever awkward. So, I thought I had everything planned out perfectly for my weekend getaway. It had been a stressful couple of months with work and life in general, so I decided I needed a break. I booked a cozy cabin in the mountains through one of those sites where you rent private homes. It looked amazing in the photos, a secluded little spot in the woods, a fireplace, a hot tub under the stars, and all the tranquility I could possibly need. I had everything packed, mentally prepared for a quiet, relaxing weekend alone, and I was absolutely determined to disconnect from my phone and the outside world. Everything was going according to plan when I drove up to the cabin on Friday afternoon. The drive was smooth, the weather was perfect, and the scenery was just as beautiful as I'd imagined. I had already mentally prepared myself for a few days of no Wi-Fi, no social media, and no distractions. The cabin was perfect for that, an old, rustic charm with modern amenities tucked into the woods. I was excited. I met the owner at the cabin to grab the keys. He was an older guy in his late 50s or early 60s, who seemed friendly enough. He explained the basics about the cabin, how to use the fireplace, where the spare towels were, and a couple of other housekeeping things. Then, he added something that, in hindsight, should have been a huge red flag. He said, "Oh, and don't go near the old barn out back. The animals don't like strangers." I figured it was just a weird, quirky thing that country folks might say, but I thought, okay, whatever, and nodded. He handed me the keys and said, "Have a nice stay." The first couple of hours were absolutely perfect. I unpacked, took a long hot shower, and made myself a warm dinner. The view from the porch was breathtaking, with the sun setting behind the mountains. I could already feel the stress of the last few months slipping away. Then came the night. After dinner, I decided to step outside, enjoy the fresh air, and maybe start a fire in the fireplace. I walked around the property, admiring the stars, when I realized the old barn was just past the tree line, tucked behind the main house. It looked abandoned, but I couldn't help but feel curious about it. It was dark, and everything around me was eerily quiet except for the rustling of the leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. I knew I wasn't supposed to go near the barn, but I figured it was just a suggestion from the owner, nothing serious. Maybe it was full of old farm equipment or something that would be dangerous to mess with. Either way, I felt adventurous and decided to check it out. I walked over to the barn, my footsteps crunching on the gravel path, the beams of my flashlight illuminating the dark, weathered wooden structure. As I got closer, I noticed a faint smell of decay in the air. I hesitated, but then I heard a noise coming from inside the barn, like a soft scraping sound, almost like something was moving around. My curiosity got the better of me, so I gently pushed the creaky door open and stepped inside. The barn was filled with dust, cobwebs, and old, rusty tools, just like I imagined. But there was something strange. In the back of the barn, there was a large cage, covered in a tarp. The tarp was torn in some places, revealing bits of metal and what looked like I didn't know what it was. My heart started to race, and I immediately felt like something was very, very wrong. Then, I heard the noise again. It was coming from the cage. My flashlight flickered as I slowly walked towards it. The closer I got, the more the noise intensified, almost like something was trying to get out. I swear I saw movement behind the tarp, and that's when I felt a wave of panic hit me. I turned to leave, but as I did, I stepped on a loose floorboard, causing a loud creak. From the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes suddenly locked onto me. A figure emerged from behind the cage. No, it was an animal, but I couldn't immediately tell what it was. It looked like a large, disheveled dog with matted fur, but its eyes were wild and unsettling. It made a low growling noise, almost like it was warning me to stay away. I froze in terror. The animal's growl grew louder, and it started to move toward me. I wasn't sure if I should run or stay still, but I instinctively bolted. My heart pounded in my chest as I sprinted back to the door, but as I reached for the handle, I noticed the door had somehow jammed. I tugged and yanked on it, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I heard the barn door creak open from the outside. It was the owner. He stepped inside and called my name, his voice calm and reassuring. I barely registered what he said, but I was beyond scared at that point. The wild animal continued to growl, circling me, and I realized with a sinking feeling that the owner hadn't just warned me about the barn because of old farm equipment. He was keeping something in there, something dangerous, and I had just walked right into it. "Get away from it," he shouted, but it was too late. The animal lunged at me. In a split second, I felt sharp claws and teeth scrape across my arm as I pushed away from the door, trying to break free. I managed to slam it open and bolted outside, not stopping until I was back at the cabin. My heart was racing, my breathing shallow and fast. I had no idea what had just happened, but I was terrified. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed awake, eyes wide, listening for any movement outside. The next morning, the owner showed up again, as if nothing had happened. He apologized, saying that the animal had gotten loose from its cage the night before, but that it wouldn't hurt anyone as long as he was there to control it. I was skeptical, but I didn't want to press the issue. I just wanted to leave. I quickly packed my things, handed him the keys, and got in my car. As I was pulling out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of the barn one last time. The tarp was gone, and I could see the cage more clearly now. But what really sent a chill down my spine was that there was no longer any sign of the animal. It was like it had just disappeared. Needless to say, I didn't stay another night. I didn't even bother asking the owner what the hell was going on. I just drove straight home, vowing never to rent a cabin again, especially one with an ominous barn. I'll never know what that thing was, but I'm pretty sure I don't want to find out. So, yeah, TIFU / **** ed up by being curious. And now, whenever I think about that weekend, I still get this strange feeling like I was lucky to escape whatever was lurking in that barn. TIFU by trying to surprise my wife with a romantic dinner, and everything went terribly wrong. So, let me give you a little context first. My wife and I have been married for 5 years, and over the years, I've tried my best to keep the romance alive, but life has gotten in the way, work, kids, responsibilities, and all that. So, I thought it would be a great idea to plan a surprise romantic evening for her. I had this vision in my head where everything would go perfectly, and she'd be blown away by how thoughtful and romantic I am. I decided I would cook her a fancy dinner, because what's more romantic than a home-cooked meal, right? I figured it'd be the perfect way to set the mood and show her how much I care. I had a couple of her favorite dishes in mind. She loves Italian food, so I was thinking of making homemade pasta, a creamy Alfredo sauce, and maybe some garlic bread. The kind of meal you would find in a cozy little bistro. The only problem was that I had never made pasta from scratch before. In fact, I didn't even know how to make the dough, but hey, how hard could it be? I spent a couple of days preparing, researching recipes, watching YouTube videos, and getting all the ingredients. I had high hopes, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. I thought I could pull this off, no problem. I had the whole day planned out, cooked dinner, set up the table with candles, soft music in the background, and then I'd get her to come home to a cozy, romantic scene. What could possibly go wrong? The first issue arose when I started making the pasta dough. It seemed simple enough. Flour, eggs, olive oil, a pinch of salt, and water. You knead it, roll it out, cut it into thin strips, and voila, pasta. Well, it wasn't quite that easy. The dough wouldn't come together properly. I followed the instructions to the letter, but it was either too dry or too sticky. I added more flour, then more water, and then more flour again, until it felt like I was just making a weird doughy mess. At this point, I was starting to get frustrated. The dough looked nothing like what I'd seen in the videos. I tried rolling it out anyway, but it was tearing and sticking to everything. I ended up with clumps of dough, some of which I threw away because they were beyond saving. I even tried using my pasta machine, but that just made it worse. It ended up clogging up with dough, and I spent what felt like hours cleaning it out. By this point, I was starting to sweat. Dinner was supposed to be ready by the time she got home. I was running out of time. So, I decided to abandon the homemade pasta idea and opt for store-bought pasta instead. It wasn't ideal, but at least it would save me some time. I boiled the pasta and started on the Alfredo sauce. Now, I've made Alfredo sauce 100 times before. It's usually foolproof: butter, heavy cream, garlic, parmesan, salt, pepper, and a bit of nutmeg. I couldn't screw this up, right? Well, I did. I had the sauce simmering on the stove, but I was so focused on the pasta that I forgot to stir it. When I finally remembered to check, the sauce had separated. It looked like an oily mess. I tried to salvage it by adding more cream, but that just made it worse. The sauce refused to come together. It looked terrible. I was starting to panic at this point. My plan was unraveling. I decided to start over with a new batch of sauce, but this time, I paid more attention. I managed to get a much better result, but it was too late. The whole kitchen was a disaster. There were pots everywhere, flour dust all over the counter, and a large pile of ruined pasta dough. I was sweaty, frustrated, and running out of time. But I couldn't give up now. I quickly threw some garlic bread in the oven. At least that part should be easy, right? Unfortunately, no. I forgot to set a timer. I was distracted by the sauce, and the garlic bread ended up burning to a crisp. I pulled it out of the oven and saw it was beyond saving. The edges were black, and it smelled like charcoal. Now, there I was, with burnt garlic bread, ruined homemade pasta dough, a sauce that looked like something out of a bad cooking show, and less than an hour before my wife would be home. I was on the verge of losing it. But I wasn't going to let this be a complete disaster. I had to salvage something. I quickly grabbed the wine I had set aside for the evening and poured myself a glass. At this point, I figured I needed something to calm my nerves. But then I heard the front door open. My wife was home. She walked into the kitchen, and the look on her face was a mixture of confusion and amusement. I stood there, looking like a frazzled mess, covered in flour, with pots and pans all over the place. The kitchen was chaotic. There was no romantic atmosphere, just the smell of burnt garlic bread and the lingering scent of desperation. I tried to play it off. "Surprise!" I said with a weak smile, holding up the wine glass like some kind of ridiculous toast. Her eyes widened. What happened?" she asked, trying not to laugh. "I was going to make you a fancy dinner," I said, gesturing to the disaster zone around us. But things didn't exactly go according to plan. She tried to stifle her laughter, but she couldn't help it. "Oh my God, what happened to the kitchen?" I was defeated. I tried to make homemade pasta, but it was a disaster. And then the sauce, and the garlic bread, well, I burned it. She took a deep breath, still trying to hold back her giggles. Okay, well, you tried. It's the thought that counts, right? I just stood there, feeling like an absolute failure. I had tried so hard to surprise her, to show her I could do something special, but it had all blown up in my face. But then, in true wife of the year fashion, she pulled me into a hug. Honestly, it's the thought that counts. You're so sweet for trying. Let's just order takeout and have a glass of wine together. It'll be just as nice. So, we did. We ordered our favorite pizza, poured ourselves some wine, and sat down to eat in the living room. And you know what? It ended up being a great night after all. We laughed about the disaster in the kitchen, and in the end, it was the company that mattered, not the food. Moral of the story: if you're going to surprise someone, maybe stick to something you know you can do. Or at least learn how to make pasta before trying to impress them. Oh, and don't forget about the garlic bread. In the end, it wasn't the perfect evening I envisioned, but it was memorable, and that counts for something. Still, I'm never making homemade pasta again. TLDR, tried to surprise my wife with a fancy home-cooked Italian dinner. Ruined the pasta, burned the garlic bread, and messed up the sauce. Ended up ordering takeout and having a great night anyway. TIFU by accidentally sending my nudes to my grandmother. It all started innocently enough. A couple of weeks ago, I decided I'd finally get around to cleaning out my phone. I had hundreds of photos, videos, and messages cluttering up my storage, so I thought it would be a productive way to kill a Saturday afternoon. My phone was full of random screenshots, old pictures of food, memes I had saved, and, let's just say, some personal content that wasn't meant for public viewing. I figured I would go through everything, delete the unimportant stuff, and keep the memories that mattered. I'm sure you can already guess where this is going. But let me give you some context before we get to the disaster. So, like any responsible adult, I have a bunch of people in my contacts who I wouldn't want to see certain personal images. That's where things went awry. Among the dozens of people I had stored, there was one contact that stood out: my grandmother, Nana. Now, to clarify, Nana is the kind of grandmother who will still send you those classic chain emails about how to get rich in 7 easy steps or share this prayer and you will be blessed with good fortune. She's sweet, but she's a bit technologically challenged. She has a smartphone, but only uses it for texting and occasionally sending pictures of the grandkids or the occasional funny dog video. On this particular Saturday, I was doing the usual cleanup. I went through my photo gallery, trashing things left and right. It was tedious work, but I was getting through it. That's when I found it, the folder labeled private. The folder containing, well, you know. It wasn't a huge collection, but it had enough content that was clearly not for public consumption. I clicked on the folder, thumbed through a few of the photos, and started deliberating. Was it time to finally delete these? I was on a cleaning spree, so why not? I hit select all and was about to press delete when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Nana. She wanted to know if I could swing by later that day to help her set up her new TV. It was a simple request, and I agreed. She'd been getting confused with the new remote, so I figured I'd help her out. I put my phone down and went back to organizing, then noticed I still had my private folder open. Maybe I was procrastinating. Maybe I was just trying to put off dealing with it. Who knows? But then my phone buzzed again. I had a new message in the group chat with my friends. They were making jokes about a crazy night out they'd had, and one of the guys sent a picture of a, shall we say, less than modest selfie he'd taken. I laughed, and I don't know why I did this, but I decided to respond with one of my own, not thinking, just doing. So, there I was, standing in my living room, getting ready to hit send on a photo I definitely shouldn't have sent. But before I could stop myself, my thumb slipped, and in my slight panic, I fumbled with the phone. Somehow, and I mean somehow, I managed to click the wrong contact, Nana. I froze. Absolute horror took over my body. I stared at the screen, watching as the image, the one that was definitely not meant for her, was sent. I immediately went into panic mode. I don't know how it happened, but it did. That's when the messages started coming in. Nana responded with a simple, "I think you sent me something by mistake, sweetie." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. There was no way to undo this. I started typing something, anything, to explain, but my hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't even form coherent sentences. I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. Of course, she wouldn't. Nana's always the type to call back 5 minutes later when you've already panicked yourself into a state of total despair. I scrambled to think of anything I could do. Should I apologize? Should I pretend it was some kind of mistake? But who was I kidding? There was no excuse for accidentally sending your grandmother a photo of your bare self. There was no whoops or "I didn't mean to do that." It was just, well, a massive failure. Eventually, I gave up trying to explain in text and left her a voicemail. "Hi, Nana. I'm so sorry about what you just received. That was an accident. I swear to you, it wasn't meant for you. I hope you can just forget about it and we can move on." But, in my head, I knew there was no moving on from this. There was no pretending this never happened. When I finally heard back from her, it was a few hours later. I didn't know what to expect, but when I checked my phone, I saw she had left a text, "It's all right, dear. Don't worry about it. I won't tell anyone." I didn't know whether to be relieved or utterly mortified. I mean, how does one even approach that conversation? I started typing a response, then deleted it. Should I thank her? Should I ask her if she was okay? I was at a loss. But then came the kicker, the thing that still haunts me to this day. Nana wasn't just sweet and forgiving. No, she decided to send me a photo of her own. In the message, she wrote, "I also have some pictures I've taken with my phone that I think you might enjoy. You can delete them if you don't want to see." I thought my brain was going to short-circuit. I didn't even want to open the message, but, of course, curiosity got the better of me. When I saw the image, I can't even describe it. Let's just say that Nana may have had her own version of the private folder she was also cleaning out. The last thing I expected was for my sweet, elderly grandmother to send me a picture of herself in the same pose. It was, to put it mildly, very unexpected. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hide under a rock. But instead, I did what anyone would do in this situation. I put my phone down, buried my face in my hands, and just stared at the ceiling. It took a full day before I could even bring myself to talk to her again. The next time I saw Nana, I tried to act normal, but we both knew. We both knew everything. There was a weird, unspoken understanding between us. I didn't mention the photos. She didn't mention them either. It was like we were pretending the whole thing never happened, even though we both knew that nothing would ever be the same. Moral of the story? Be very careful with your phone. And never, under any circumstances, clean out your private folder while texting your grandmother. I guess at least now I know we both share the same awkward secret. Great. Just great. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.